Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I was shocked when I heard you say that all government employees should be treated with respect, because that is absolutely not what I saw on the ground level. I mean, I saw people crying when they were coming out of USAID. I think they'd been given 15-minute intervals to retrieve their belongings. I talked to people who were probationary employees who'd been given these mass emails that they're going to be terminated. They'd quit jobs and moved from other places, sold their houses to come do this work in reasonable reliance on often for the government to work for the federal government and desire to serve their country. And they were unceremoniously pushed out the door. And when you said, I know you want to know what career staff thinks, that was a shocker to me too, because many of these people, when they were being forced out, were trying to call and find out what their status was, whether they were going to be able to come back to work or not, when they would be terminated, all of those things. And that still goes on, and they don't get the answers from you all. So, I appreciate your view of what's going on, but you got to know that it's entirely different from the standpoint of the people who were going through this. And I just want to focus on three quick areas where there's a potential impact. I mean, one thing you said that was interesting to me, you're going to ask for additional 20 positions, if I heard you correct,
Yes,
at OMB. It's a little ironic because you're slashing positions across the government and funding. But we had the FBI director testify here a few weeks ago, and he came in and said he has 1,100 vacancies, I think it is, and he needs 1,300 additional. I think we can all agree that the importance of public safety, and someone just mentioned fraud, nobody ferrets it out better than the FBI. Yet, the day after he testified here, he testified in the Senate and said, I don't need those positions after all. And just one quick point on the fraud piece. I saw an FBI agent who runs the fraud division testify that between $500 and $700 million every year is stolen from the United States by our overseas adversaries, and that they needed additional resources to track that down. But apparently you guys aren't going to give that to them. With respect to national security and the science piece of this too, the trauma quote's been read to you, and I heard your comment, it's taken out of context, and I listened to that speech. I don't agree. I think it was consistent with what you were saying that day, but let's just assume for the moment that what you're saying there is really true. The bottom line is that the actions that you've taken since then reiterates the message that you're trying to traumatize these people and that you want to treat them like villains. And so what we've got going on right now on the science and tech piece that's rippling through NASA and other agencies where it's critical for us to have these science and tech folks, AI, the competition for quantum computing and the like, they think they're being forced out of these positions. They're starting to look to go to Europe. They're starting to look to go back to Korea or India or other places rather than staying here and doing the work. And I know from businesses in my district that they need people from overseas because we're not producing enough of them over here in the United States. Yet we're narrowing the pipeline based on what you're doing with respect to cutting grants to help fund. We're narrowing the pipeline with respect to the impact you're having on the universities in science and tech. We're narrowing the pipeline with respect to the postdocs and other people doing the research and the government contractors who are doing much of this work too. So over and over again, we're squeezing that line down. If you look at the contrast with China, they're doing exactly the opposite. And they're doing exactly the opposite in the areas where we're in the most competitive areas and where we really need to win. We don't want China to get ahead of us militarily. We don't want China to get ahead of us on quantum computing and AI. But we're making cuts to NIST. We're making cuts to NASA. We're making cuts to the NIH. We're making cuts across the board on some of the most important aspects of what we need to do in the United States to maintain that lead. And with respect to public health, I see my time's running out here, and I guess we can do a second round in a minute, but same kind of thing. The cuts to NIH, my father died from Alzheimer's. I'm a cancer survivor. You guys shut down clinical trials in the middle of those going forward. And it's not like we can just flip a switch and it comes back and starts over again. Some of those are going to take years to catch back up to where they were. And some of the people who are conducting the research are leaving the United States because they don't want to have that happen again. So I appreciate the goal of going after waste, fraud, and abuse. I don't think that's what you all have really focused on here, your impact certainly, because we can go through that in the second round, but you're really undermining our ability to compete and stay ahead of China on really critical areas like national security and public safety. Yeah, I don't know, but my colleague there, you know, made me think of Bill Gates's quote. He just said, the wealthiest man in the world is basically killing the poorest kids in the world by making these cuts. And you're sort of executing that. I appreciate the comment that was made there, but we really can't sugarcoat this. More people are going to die. And if I think I heard what you said there, prevention's going to get less funding than it currently is. And I think in every model, prevention is better than trying to cure it after a disease is contracted. But, you know, real quick on this, the merit hiring plan, which I saw one of the questions, I think it was question number 3. Identify 1 or 2 relevant executive orders or policy initiatives that are significant to you and explain how you would help implement them if hired. And I read that and I was like, well, I don't know that every president's going to be issuing 50 executive orders per day. So if it's just a commitment to do what follow one of President Trump's executive orders, I think that's totally inappropriate. And I think there's a lot of positions that we need to fill in the federal government, like some of the science and engineering jobs I mentioned a few minutes ago. I don't really care if they're reading the president's executive orders per se. I'm more curious, I care more about them curing cancer or addressing Alzheimer's, or if they're federal agents tracking down Sinaloa cartel or identifying and tracking down the waste, fraud, and abuse that's actually occurring by major malfactors, or the competition with our adversaries abroad. So I see my 2 minutes are running out. I do want to say this. I just noticed, I saw this up here, and it matches the T-shirts in the audience. To the labor community out there, stay strong.
Thank you very much.